Everything, everywhere, all at Wuhan, Charles.
Yeah, no bat soup for me
We haven't
tonight.
haven't heard that much about Wuhan in a while, but of course Tulsi Gabbard going out with a bang. I mean, but I think the question a lot of people have is what's really going to happen now? Okay, sure. She said that Fauci did all this stuff, which I think certainly most viewers of Crowdsourced the Truth already knew he did that. But what is really going to happen to Fauci now?
And to the nonprofit sector. I mean, remember that you and I cottoned onto this stuff immediately. We got to EcoHealth Alliance, I want to say March, April 2020. We were all over, the relationship between EcoHealth Alliance and the government, the fact that it got government grants from the Department of Defense and other places. And this was just two schmucks, looking at paper. I mean, where the hell has the FBI and the CIA and the 17, where have those agencies been for 6 years on all of this? I mean, and this is not a small thing. This is what happens when nerds, conflicted nerds, sign on to the idea that nobody should really be in charge of anything, that the people at the top, need to be protected. They need to have plausible deniability. We can't really tell them the whole truth, because if they knew the whole truth, then we'd be fired and punished and possibly jailed. That's what was going on here. I mean, and this goes back to 2005, and centrally implicates, I think, Barack Obama. Remember when we have discussed in the past, but Barack's first trip as senator was under the aegis of the the Republican senator and Rhodes Scholar from Indiana. I forget his name now. Maybe you'll remember.
Lugar?
Lugar, yeah, Richard Lugar, who it was said to take this fresh-faced young senator under his wing and expose him to the intricacies of international relations. Well, what he was doing was traveling around the former Soviet Union to begin the process of, in theory, destroying weapons, biological and other weapons, using the good auspices of the United States. Well, what if that never really happened? What if what we were doing was just taking inventory of what they had and then adding in to our illegal stocks the stocks of weapons, the stocks of biological and other weapons that shouldn't be used, and according to treaties, actual treaties, not JCPOAs, but actual treaties that the United States is a party to. This is not a small scandal, and far be it for me to give leverage to China, but if I were China right now, I would be hopping mad at this, because Trump and others referred to this virus as the China virus during the campaigns, when in fact, this was a U.S. effort. And Fauci knew about it. Fauci's actions are the actions. What is that mens rea? The way he's behaved as a Napoleonic tyrant in the medical community, enriching himself, going like Zelensky. I'm amazed he didn't try to give himself an Academy Award. But at the peak of his power, Fauci behaved as if he was a doctor to the planet. And in truth, this man should never be allowed inside any kind of medical or scientific establishment. And his track record has to be, and what he's done here has to be fully exposed. And there needs to be, going forward, a Fauci doctrine. You see a rising Fauci, and you say to that guy, listen, there's no such thing as settled science. The damage that this person did, this Fauci and Birx and others did to a generation of young people around the world, not to mention to people like my own father. My brother took the vaccine and had a stroke. This is on the level worse even than Mengele. Fauci succeeded in locking the world down. I know nobody particularly cares about, the people of Indonesia and the island, beach resorts on Lombok. But during lockdown, these beach resorts were entirely shut down, and every business that catered to tourists went bankrupt. That's just one place. I'm sure around the world, many other places suffered. Kids, I think the trauma that little kids in that period went through is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And if they have kids, it's going to affect their kids.
I
And
think
this motherfucker,
not just little kids, Charles. I think there's people of a certain age, like young teenagers who are now, in college or finishing college, have been kind of like anti-socially affected in a way that's going to skew an entire generation.
yeah. And this motherfucker has his name on a building at Holy Cross College.
Fauci does.
Yeah. This idea, and it was at the time particularly offensive to me because I grew up one of three sons of a scientist. And my own father, nobody's perfect, but he questioned his own work constantly, right? His own patents. Could they be improved? There's no such thing as science standing still. And this motherfucker, Fauci, I immediately, I mean, you were suspicious of him perhaps before I was, but when somebody says it's okay for you to go on a Tinder date, but you better wear a mask.
Make sure she's real slutty.
Yeah, he's a moron. A fucking moron. Right?
Yeah.
And 6 years ago, right? You had your channel, multiple channels shut down because we questioned the obvious insanity of what Fauci was doing and what people were following through with.
Now, in certain ways, not to minimize the health impacts that it's had, but in certain ways, I don't want to say it's worse, but that's an equally big subject to discuss, because for our whole entire lives, everybody who's alive right now, it's like, hey, America, free speech, free society. But that was the most stunning example of them like taking control of the airwaves and shutting up anybody who did not agree. I mean, it was really total seizure of the public consciousness and the U.S. government. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it was AI, actual insanity. And since then, the tools of potential control have only gotten stronger.
Yeah, and more hidden, I think. See,
Exactly.
That was heavy-handed, throwing channels off of YouTube and stuff is sort of very obvious. What I see happening now is far more clandestine, not that obvious to people, but perhaps equally oppressive.
Right. And, in a sense, shame on Trump for falling for it. Right. I mean, he was initially dismissive of the need for lockdowns, but the signs, the signs were so obvious at the time. People, I was explaining this to folks out here in Malaysia. I mean, when you and we heard, and you, I think, went independently of me, but we heard that, hospitals were overflowing and the mortuaries were, the incinerators were going full blast or whatever. And we walked around and looked at these places and they were empty.
Yeah.
And the nurses and doctors, who would talk to us did not confirm what was being told. And, you put on top of it the fact that hospitals were given incentives to say that people died either from COVID or of COVID. They were given monetary incentives. So of course the numbers went up.
Yeah.
And on top of which, there were no flu deaths or no flu statistics. I mean, it was just obvious fraud. And what was it driven towards? It was driven towards the need to get Trump out of office so that the Obama and Bush frauds would not be fully exposed to the public. That's why this was done. They were desperately afraid that Trump would have that second term.
Yeah.
And so under Biden, they had 4 years to go and try to clean up the evidence. And additionally, they thought they had 4 years to run against the statute of limitations on these various
Well,
crimes.
and to get Trump, right? All the Letitia James and Fannie Willis and all that.
Right. And these are, when you see this type of behavior capping off this absurd spectacle of the Juneteenth opening, of the Obama Presidential Center, the Obama toilet bowl, and just brazen thinking that I could raise $850 million for a structure that is not going to hold any physical records of his administration. Why? Because any damning records have probably been deleted, although they're so bad at what they do that most likely they left behind evidence that perhaps the Trump Department of Justice already has in the FBI. But I mean, the in-your-face display. There was an interview. I watched a TV excerpt. People went so far in Chicago, I think local TV affiliate went so far as to say that Obama's real goal in going through college was to become an architect, and that's why he spent so much personal time on the design of this monstrosity.
Was that a guess, or did Obama say that
No,
was?
no. There's quotes from him, and he selected the granite at the quarries on the outside. He did this and he did that. See, this is what happens if you take somebody who's basically a failure, right? I mean, we all understand that just because you fail in school doesn't mean you can't win at life, right? But if you take somebody and try to present him as a constitutional law professor, and you forbid anyone from looking at that person's high school record, explaining why, if he was such a great student, did he end up at Occidental? How did he transfer from Occidental to Columbia? A very difficult thing to do. What did he actually do for the years between Columbia and getting into Harvard Law School? What did his Harvard Law School application say about him? As a guess, it celebrated the fact that he was part Kenyan, part American, part Hawaiian, part the Indonesian ties, maybe Muslim. And how did he actually do at Harvard Law School? Who decided to make him the president of the Harvard Law Review? Again, that's not the editor-in-chief. That's the business manager. What really happened after Harvard Law School? Why didn't he get a job at a serious law firm? I think he worked at the one in Chicago where Michelle was a year ahead of him.
Austin.
Sidley Austin. Why didn't he get a full-time offer from Sidley Austin if he was such a great student? First Black president of the Harvard Law Review, job at Sidley and Austin. He doesn't get what does he do after Harvard Law School? He's a professional pain in the ass, and an undistinguished one at that.
Undistinguished. He's a distinguished pain in the ass. He really stood out among all the other pains in the ass.
Right, and so you see, when he takes control takes control of a process, it's a vanity exercise. He raises $850 million, and we all understand, having looked at the Clinton Foundation, there they claimed they spent $160 million. Now, in addition to the 850, I saw a report that the city, I think, spent $120 million on infrastructure to prepare the site. So you're talking about $1 billion for a monstrosity. And instead of being a repository of physical records, and I think there isn't, even in the electronic age, it's useful to look at a physical record because, yes, you can have notes on an electronic record, but people are sloppy. And, to see a physical record that Obama touched, maybe in his left-handed scrawl, put some notes on something, that's important to do. And, if the Clintons could spend $160 million, why did you need to spend $1 billion on this awful looking piece of shit? And why are we only now, he left office January 20th, 2017. Why are we only now getting a chance to, in theory, look at the records of this presidency? And how do you go from on your 1023 saying you're going to comply with the Presidential Libraries Act to now a structure that is like, fuck the Presidential Libraries Act? You're not going to do that anymore. We are out of the goodness of our hearts going to pay to scan all these physical records into electronic format. We're going to do that, and of course, with what supervision?
Birth certificate department.
Yeah, here's this. How many archivists do we need to kill to get this right? I mean, this is in your face. I got power. I did what I want. I stole the election of 2020. I ran the presidency. I served basically as acting president with no tether, no scrutiny. And I had the arch villain John Podesta at the end hand out $300 billion that we know about to people like Stacey Abrams and others. I mean, this is unparalleled. This is the audacity of brazen fraud. It's not the audacity of hope. Then we have this certified moron, Hee Haw Harris, giving a word salad over the weekend, saying that she really believes that hope should be a verb. That's a good thing because it is a verb. You fucking moron. you know? I mean, people sitting there, a collection of morons.
Everyone's like, oh, a verb. I better go look that up.
Yeah. We don't need those anymore,
She obviously not good at Mad Libs.
Yeah. Well, no, remember during her vice presidency, she bragged about, one of the first things she did every day was play Wordle.
Oh my God.
How do you have time as vice president of the United States to do anything other than your job? Right? To brag about having the time to play Wordle, and then you have her stepdaughter, perhaps the ugliest model ever, gets an elite modeling contract between the election day, the inauguration day in 2021. I mean, the grift, the theft. And still you have people celebrating this bullshit. There was also a story, actually, I read that there's somebody in the IRS that's been caught basically charging people a toll to give them grants that they shouldn't get, and then charging them a percentage of that grant. She raked in $20+ million.
Business Association, is this it?
That may have been that or something else. I mean, the level of insanity out of Washington, D.C. is mind-numbing.
Yeah.
And obviously Elon Musk doesn't need my advice. He's the richest man ever. And his example is he can be CEO simultaneously of an enormous number of very complex institutions. I think that's dangerous. I think that you really need, it'd be much better, maybe he'll do this, maybe he'll merge some of these things together. But in the case of Trump, right now, he is many successes to his life, but he stands on extremely perilous ground at this point. This idea that you're going to have any kind of an agreement with a country controlled by the mullahs and the Revolutionary Guard is preposterous.
But isn't it coming apart at the seams already? They're saying that the first round of Iran talks concluded in Switzerland with fireworks and threats of a renewed war.
Right, exactly. But you don't need to hold the talks in Switzerland. You need to take a step back. In the same way that there's never going to be a Trump Tower in Mogadishu, Somalia, right? It should be obvious to people as smart as Vance, maybe Witkoff, and certainly Trump and Rubio, that a deal that ends up setting the precedent that a regime can charge tolls, that a regime that has been stealing money from the people of Iran, forget the U.S., stealing billions of dollars from the people of Iran, who tried to rise up in March, and 35,000 people were allegedly killed by this regime in March. Why in June are we going to do anything other than ensure that this regime and the Revolutionary Guards and its backers are out? Because we know, the Strait of Hormuz should be international waters. The notion that the United States is now going to go and charge tolls to other people is also stupid, because that sets up the Strait of Malacca near where I live and other choke points as places where Malaysia or Singapore or other countries can say, we're going to do the same thing. If the U.S. can do it, then we can do it. Suddenly you no longer have freedom of navigation in international waters, which is something that the U.S. Navy was sworn and dedicated to uphold. So these are, you need to kind of take a step back. I'm sure there are minutia people who are working on the order of the negotiation play, but why are we relying on Pakistan and Qatar to be intermediaries with Iran? Fuck that. You know, it's really dangerous stuff that we're doing here. And what the other side wants to do, and what the deep state wants to do, is they want chaos. They want the argument in November, you know, welded into everybody's head that Trump is a madman, that his team are the Epstein client team, that all they're doing is stealing money, and they need to be out because we need to replace them with democratic socialists. That's what they're trying to do. And Trump, I think, is playing. You could say this is five-dimensional chess, that he wants this. He did the MOU so it would fail, so he'd have more legitimacy to take everything over. Bullshit. Bullshit. When we had them on the ropes, back whenever that was, many weeks ago, we should have finished the job. And instead, this kind of uncertainty. I mean, we could lose an entire year here. And after that, we could lose the country. If people like Ma'am Dummy and this new rising mayor in Washington, D.C., and Hakeem Jeffries and people like him in the House and the Senate have the next 2 years working with the deep state to basically turn the United States into the UK. That's the direction we're going here. And I don't understand why Trump is taking so long here. I mean, unless he has this grant. Now, I saw an interview in the Oval Office where he formally accused Barack Obama of treason, actually used the word treason, said that the person who directed the grand conspiracy was Barack Obama, and that they have all the proof they need to make that case.
But he's acting like a podcaster. He's not acting like the commander-in-chief who has the ability to make something happen about that. Nothing is happening.
Right. With these people, I mean, when I got involved in a battle in Washington, D.C., that I won, I had to absolutely lose the plot in a meeting room with very powerful people and threaten to put them in prison before the election of 1996, which would have affected the Republican Party. And I did that. I threatened them. And I carried out my threat. And I won. Trump needs to do that. This idea that Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman would have access to Situation Room recordings.
What happened with that?
Well, I think they're looking into that pretty hard. But the idea that they'd have that, and this book will be coming out, I think, this week. Maybe Tuesday it comes out, or next week. But, people have the book. How the fuck did these two reporters get that kind of access? They didn't just show up in a situation room. Somebody, at least one person, maybe multiple people, had to conspire. There have to be records of how these people who got access, unless this is Trump himself or the Trump team.
Why would he do that?
I don't think it makes any sense. So, I mean, there's something insidious here. And, you need to just suddenly reverse course, right? And you got this July 4th celebration coming up. A lot of people, especially the Iranians, would like to see the July 4th ceremonies be a disaster, right? And whether there's talk in this supposed third assassination attempt, there are anonymous people or alias people on X claiming that it was a conspiracy involving 47.
What do you mean, the drones at the UFC?
Yeah, that it's much bigger than. There's some people claiming that they, with specifics, that that they're far more co-conspirators than the patsies that have been surfaced so far, and that there are connections between the patsies and the crooks assassination attempted. The same phones being used, the cutouts. I mean, it's all bullshit probably. But the point is, Trump is 80. How many more years of life is he going to have as physically intact and sentient and, on top of his game? And this is a crisis right now. The idea that you let the vice president of the United States go to Switzerland to meet with a bunch of nobodies, not world leaders, and be hostage to what the Pakistanis and the Qataris claim they're going to get done for. I mean, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And
look, he's got Jared Kushner there. Why?
Again,
this is
ridiculous.
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous. What do you need a State Department for?
Right.
I mean, it just you can't. It goes to the heart of what I've been saying for a while. You need to understand who your counterparty is. Donald Trump is, for the moment, the leader of the free world, right? Why would you waste time having your deputy go to Switzerland in the summer and wait for somebody from Pakistan and Qatar to maybe get you a meeting with somebody who doesn't rule Iran? It's ridiculous. All over a memorandum of understanding, which by its very terms is not binding.
Doesn't it smack of saving face, Charles? Like this isn't going the way that Trump wanted, and he's trying to we got to continue this conversation in the First Amendment form because we're out of time right here, but people are going to join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I've got a little bit of a surprise for you, Charles. I found, because we got to talk more about Fauci as well, I found our first journey out during the days of COVID where we slipped on feces right here in the currently filthy Penn Station. So we'll take a look at that. Thanks to everybody who is sponsoring the show. What's that?
What a nice surprise, Jason.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't forget, people can follow me on X at JG_CSTT.